Let me start by thanking all of you for coming this morning and for patiently awaiting an update on our review of the reporting of the suspected suicide of Miss Anne Brewster on February 25th, 1964 at 1627 Templeman Street. During the month of February in 2024, a feature story aired about this terrible incident that rekindled a lot of concerns and suspicions about what occurred that day. Thank you, Councilwoman Tabatha Taylor, for reaching out to me and inquiring if it was possible to reopen the case and have another look. I agreed and began immediately to assemble a team of experts to assist with this review. Every agency that I called committed to assist without hesitation. I would like to thank the Caddo Parish Coroner's Office, the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office, the Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office, the Louisiana State Police, the Shreveport City Attorney's Office, the United States Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Grambling State University Police Chief Rodney Demery, and the most seasoned investigators from the Shreveport Police Department, Lieutenant Lane Smith, Sergeant Allison Aslan, and Sergeant Johnny Eli. Also, I want to thank my very best research officer and commander of the Central Records Bureau, Captain Colette Kelly. Each of the team members brought unique talents and perspectives to the table. I felt that's what it would be, what was needed to review this incident that is now 60 years old. Given light to that period of time in our history, I believe the best team had been summoned. This was a terrible incident that kindled many concerns, suspicions, and disbelief. Our mission here was to attempt to find answers to as many of those questions, concerns, and disbeliefs as we possibly could, and let the evidence lead us in any direction. Each time we met, there would be extensive discussions and investigative assignments to follow that was given for the next meeting. We are today at a point where it does not appear to be any more evidence surfacing to direct us. I believe that the evidence review was able to answer some of the questions, some of the concerns, and some of the suspicions with scientific and expert analysis, but not all of them. Thank all of you again for your patience. At this time, I call upon the Caddo Parish Coroner, Dr. Todd Tomer, for his comments.
Thank you all for coming. This was an interesting investigation. It's difficult to reopen a case after 60 years and try to assemble the facts and find out what evidence leads us in the direction that we need to go into. There were a lot of questions in the community. There were a lot of unanswered questions in the community. And needless to say, when we got the information that we have, and I'm going to be the first one to say, I don't think we were able to obtain all the evidence that we would need to make a definitive conclusion. But the evidence that we did have after 60 years was consistent with this being a very unfortunate suicide. I'd be happy to discuss all the evidence that we have as we go through it and answer questions if we need to do that. But like I said, some of the things that we did, just to let you know, we looked at the photographs that we have from that period of time. And the photographs that we have at that period of time are not perfect photographs. Those photographs were not crime scene photographs because there were no crime scene photographs available. The photographs that we had were coroner photographs. Coroner photographs occur after a crime scene has already done their investigation, and the coroner does his pictures at that point in time. So we were able to look at the scene at that point, but those were an already altered scene to a small degree, not to a large degree. We were able to look at the police reports and the validity of the police reports and what were written in the police reports, trying to look for the veracity of the statements that were made there to see if there were any evidence we could find that there were false statements made. We were not able to find false statements there. I guess the most compelling evidence was the suicide note itself. The suicide note that we had, and once again, we'll go into greater detail later if you need to, was translated and transcribed in detail and sent to a forensic psychiatrist. And the forensic psychiatrist looked at that suicide note and said, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he would testify in court that that was a suicide note written by Anne Brewster contemporaneously when it happened, that it was written by somebody under stress but not under duress, and it was multiple pages long and contained multiple details of her personal life and personal relationships with other people in her life. It was his opinion that that was a suicide note, unfortunate suicide note. He made a statement in his evaluation that suicide is a failure of the psychiatric services. When people are depressed and suicidal, we have better resources today to interact with those people than they had in 1964. We had better medications to treat today than we did in 1964. I believe, from a personal standpoint, not from my professional standpoint, I believe there's no doubt in my mind that Anne Brewster was a victim of the civil rights movement. I think she was depressed and suicidal over the lack of success the efforts had made to move forward in the civil rights movement, which led to her suicide. But as it stands at this point in time, we were not able to uncover any hard evidence to lead us in any other direction other than that. I don't know if anybody else is going to make any other statements, but if they do, and afterwards anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer questions about that case. Once again, this is an incredibly tragic part of our lives. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. As you all know, I asked for an investigation into Ms. Brewster's death after watching the story on KSLA with Dominique Ben and Mr. Bubba. And I am listening to the report first, as you all are. There are some things that I overwhelmingly disagree with because of the fact that I had the opportunity to speak with Ms. Brewster's nephew on this morning, and no one has discussed anything with him. Ms. Brewster's nephew, his grandfather was her brother. And so no one has had any conversations with the family, according to Mr. Monroe Townsend, that is still ready to discuss his aunt's case. I'm not sure, or I don't believe that the body has been exhumed, and I think that with the forensic evidence, with the forensic technology that we have right now, that would allow you to dive in just a little bit further. I do not want to say that Ms. Brewster, at this particular point in time, died of a suicide. I think at this time that her death is still unknown. Exactly. I think that you have to be very concrete when you say that, or to even speak to her state of mind during that time, during the civil rights era. I'm a black woman, and then black people had to go over here and face tormentuous times, which everybody's stress level at that time would have been heightened because you didn't have the opportunity to look at or even talk to someone of a different color than you are. Your life was threatened if you even thought about having any level of change. So I do want to address and look at further to see what was done, but those are just a few of the things that I am saying to you right now. And I am speaking on behalf of Mr. Townsell, who is the nephew, again, of Ms. Brewster, that I spoke to this morning and that I spoke to several months ago as it relates to this case. And no, I do not think that Ms. Brewster's death at this particular point in time can adequately be ruled a suicide. And then, again, when you can speak to the stress level of the civil rights movement, hey, we still face some of those stresses right now.
So immediately following this, we are going to meet with Councilwoman Taylor and discuss some of those things that she addressed. We understand this is a very sensitive investigation, and the Shreveport Police Department is going to continue to do everything we can to address those concerns. We will take some brief questions. If anybody has them, we'll do the best we can to address them.
Yeah, I understood at the beginning of this that there was a question about like whether the case was officially reopened or whether the evidence would be examined first and then that determination. Was this case ever officially reopened?
I guess you could call it that. We reviewed all of the evidence that we were able to find, all of the reports, took on new evidence, interviewed people that we did not know that had been interviewed before. and make sure you understand this. I'm not saying it at all that this is over, we're done. At any time, if additional information surfaces that leads us in any direction, we'll be more than happy to explore that.
But SBD is not going to do any more active work on this case at this time.
Until something different surface to lead us in some direction.
And I just want to clarify on the first question. Is open and close a distinction that your department actually makes, or is that just kind of common parlance that people like us in the media use?
Anything that's unsolved is not closed. It's tabled until something new surfaces about that particular case.
Well, would you say that this case was closed and then reopened, or is that not an appropriate way to discuss what happened?
It was reevaluated, yes.
Okay, Chief,
Yes, sir.
here's a question that I need to ask. First off, I was supposed to be on the task force. I never received any call about any meeting that we were in. That's already number one. Was Shreveport more racist in 1964, or is it more racist in 2024?
I wasn't here in 1964. I don't know.
So,
And
but would you care to say that America, Shreveport Caddo, was more racist in 1964 or 2024?
given the times in 1964, and from what I've read and what I've seen, I can say that in 1964 that definitely was disparity.
And you're familiar with who George Dortos was, right?
I am.
And so do you think that in 1964, there was a fair, impartial, and objective autopsy done on Anne Brewster?
I don't know, because the Commissioner of Public Safety didn't do an autopsy.
Yeah, no,
He
no,
was Commissioner of Public
coroner.
Safety at that
I mean,
time.
but we understand the politics behind the scenes. I know people want to create the illusion that there is no politics between the coroner, police commissioner, police chief, sheriff, but we all know behind the scenes that there are politics. I have a question for Dr. Toma. Dr. Toma.
Can you tell me what committee you was talking about earlier for your first question? I don't know what committee you're talking
I was put on the
about.
committee, the task force, to help investigate this particular case.
Who did that?
Myself, Gary Joyner, Tabatha Taylor actually put me on it. I received no information. And the reason I ask this question is because if you're inside of law enforcement and you're inside of the coroner's office and you don't have an objective person on from the community, a lot of things can go hidden. Because the question now I wanted to ask Dr. Toma, are you familiar with civil rights icon Medgar Evers?
Yes,
Are you familiar with his case?
yes.
Do you know what happened in this case?
I don't know exactly what you're specifically referring to,
His
but
body was exhumed. Are you familiar with that?
sure,
In order for them to prosecute, they had to get his body exhumed.
correct.
Was
We entertained, as a committee, as a group, we entertained the idea of exhuming Anne Brewster's body. What you have to look at is there evidence, and what would you be able to get if you exhumed the body? What other evidence would you get? And we looked at that in detail, and there's not any evidence, and let me explain why.
Yeah, I need to hear that.
Okay, yes, because Miss Brewster, when she committed suicide, or supposedly committed suicide, allegedly committed suicide, her body was released and it went to Benevolent Funeral Home. They embalmed her and washed her body and prepared her for an open casket funeral. Now, when we exhume somebody, we're gonna look for trace evidence, we're gonna look for gunshot residue, we're gonna look for ballistics. The problem is, we could have potentially autopsied her and gotten the bullet available, but we don't, 60 years later, we don't have a gun to compare it to. So there would have been no reason to try to get the bullet out of what was in her head. Gunshot residue would be totally useless 60 years later. She was washed, she was cleaned, et cetera. If it was positive, it wouldn't mean anything. If it was negative, it wouldn't mean anything. So there was no evidence there. And there's no trace evidence to evaluate at this point in time. So we weighed the circumstances and said, do we have evidence to write a summons to exhume her body? And we would not be able to do it because there's not any evidence that we would get out of it. There wouldn't be any useful evidence. If I felt like there was useful evidence available to do that, I would have done it in a heartbeat.
So
But I don't think there is.
Why do you think they exhumed Megan Everett?
I'm not familiar with why the details were that they did that, but you have to go through a process to show that there's evidence, and this is what we expect to recover. In this situation, there wasn't anything that we thought would be helpful in this situation. There's just not anything there to be able to do that. I would have done that if I thought it gave us some answers. And once again, I apologize if I was misinterpreted what I said earlier. In 1964, this was ruled a suicide.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know whether that's true or not, but we don't have enough evidence available at this time to overturn that, because we looked at all the evidence in the roads, and we went down the roads of where those led us, and we didn't find hard evidence to overturn that. So I'm not saying, I'm open to the idea. If more evidence becomes available, I'm open to looking at it. Every report that I ever write says, I reserve the right to amend this should new evidence occur. And that's where we are in this situation. So we did entertain that. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Tim, I have a question. You
Yes.
said that there wasn't evidence to overturn it. What would be the reason for not saying that it was undetermined, since we don't know suicide and we don't know homicide?
Hopefully in the conference afterwards, we'll be able to answer some of those questions for you.
Do we have, are there any other media questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
There's so much public interest in this. Will your reports be available to the public in any way, partial, full report, so we can actually read it?
So that is the purpose of this press conference. We're letting you know at this point in time, we have not found any new findings to really report. Our investigators, everybody behind that you see here, had vested interest in this and wanted to investigate this fully. And these guys worked tirelessly. They spent a lot of hours looking into this. And we're just as interested in the outcome as you are. And we appreciate the passion. I know Chief Smith, he put the best people we could find to look at this. And we had to go in the direction in which the evidence took us. And that's what these investigators have done. And as Chief indicated, by no means are we done with this. If new evidence appears, the Shreveport Police Department will do everything and will exhaust all our capabilities to come to a resolution.
Any witnesses come forward, or you want to talk about that?
We'll talk about that.
I just want to ask a question. Councilwoman Taylor said that her nephew had never been contacted, and of course, he could have valuable information. Is there any reason why her nephew was not contacted?
I don't know that information, and as soon as we wrap this up, I'm going to put Councilwoman Taylor with our investigators and see if we can make a determination. And that could be something that alters the course of this investigation, but it was important that we updated our partners, because you guys have remained patient. This has been something that's been going on for several months, and we wanted you to know where we were and what our findings have been up to this point. So we're going to wrap this up at this time. I do appreciate everybody coming, and if anything else changes, we will advise you. Yo.
I would have to look
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. So that was the update from SPD. Now, this was a team that was put together by Chief Wayne Smith to reopen the case of Anne Brewster. She is known to be a civil rights icon here in the Shreveport community. And as Tabatha Taylor mentioned, she submitted an ordinance, it was around early March of this year, to reopen the unsolved, it's believed that it's an unsolved murder, but, as you just heard, the investigator said that all the evidence leads to a ruling of suicide, and that there is no more evidence to kind of sway them from what was declared in 1964. In 1964, the ruling was that it was a suicide. You heard some details there by the investigator saying that evidence of the suicide note was reviewed, and in that suicide note, they say that information was detailed of Brewster's life, that they believe that was written by her. They say that they believe the details in there were very specific to her life, and that they believe that she was under stress due to the civil rights movement of that time. And the ruling so far, as of right now, as you heard, remains suicide. So that is the ruling of the case, but they're seeking more information. They say that if more details come up, they're willing to continue the investigation, and seeking new details to see if that could be overruled. But for right now, that is what they said. Councilwoman Tabatha Taylor, as we mentioned, she was the one that submitted the ordinance to reopen the case. She was not happy with the findings that were detailed today. She made mention of family members, of the Brewster family members, that were not contacted and not involved in the reopening of this case, with the possibility of changing the outcome, or details that were shared today. So as you just heard from Corporal Bordelin, they're going to go ahead and sit down with Tabatha Taylor right now and kind of just, talk more about what can be done, and if there's more details that can come out from speaking with family members, as well as a lot of mention and questions about whether the body could be exhumed, or the remains could be exhumed. So that was definitely brought up, and you heard from the lead investigator there say, explain that they would need to have hard evidence, or understand that there would be more evidence could be found if the body was exhumed, but they did not believe that if the body was exhumed, more evidence would come of that. So, they would need to have a hard enough reason, really, to be able to say that they're going to exhume it, and maybe something else can be found. Now, that's what they shared today. Those are all the details that were shared today as, they reopened the case and continue to investigate. They say no new details were found to sway them from the ruling of the 1964 ruling that it was a suicide. It was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So, a lot of people you heard kind of there asking questions, really not happy with what was shared today. But we'll continue to keep you guys updated as new information comes out. If there are any new details on this case, as they said, they're open to continuing the investigation. It's not a shut and closed case at this point. You heard from Chief Wayne Smith and the lead investigator there. So we'll just keep you guys updated online, and you can see more details later on in our newscast today as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a full report on this press conference. You can stick with us right here on KTALnews.com. Make sure you download our app, available on Apple and Android devices. Make sure you guys get all of our push notifications so you don't miss a live stream. Have a great rest of your day, guys. We'll see you next time.